Hello everyone. Welcome to the course of the strategy management. Okay, so today I will talk about the managing the strategy making process for competitive advantage. So our objective, okay, first we will talk about what is strategy, what is competitive advantage. And the second, okay, we will discuss the strategy role of the management at different levels. Okay, and finally, we will identify the step in the strategy planning process. Okay, so let me think. Why do some firms success while others failed? Okay, so we can think about in the small formed industries. Okay, for example, why the Apple, okay, its iPhone has success. However, the other brand like the HTC, why they failed? Okay, so this is because the Apple have the good strategy. So this is why strategy is important for firms. Because if the firms have a good strategy, they can achieve the competitive advantage and result in the higher profit. So this is why strategy is important for firms. Okay, so what is the strategy? Okay, there are many definitions, okay, about strategy. However, here the strategy, we defined it as the set of related action that the managers take to increase their company's performance or attain their goals. So if a firm's strategy results in the superior performance, it's said to have a competitive advantage. Okay, so this is the definition of the strategy. And next, we can say, okay, what is a strategy? The other, okay, famous scholars like Michael Porter, okay, in the 2007, he pointed out that if firms wanted to achieve their competitive advantage, there are three critical points. Okay, they are positioning, trade-off, and fit. Okay, so positioning, the firms have to create a unique and valuable positioning. Trade-off means the essentials of the strategy is the change what not to do and what to do. So because the firms have limited resources, so the firms have choice what not to do and what to do. Okay, that's a trade-off. And the fit. Fit means the strategy that concentrates on the combined activities. So these activities, they have to fit each others. Okay, so here the Porter, okay, they think that if the firm wanted to achieve their competitive advantage, okay, there are three critical points: positioning, trade-off, and fit. Okay. And the next, okay, we talk about the strategy leadership, competitive advantage, and superior performance. Okay, here, so we can select strategy leadership is the concern with managing the strategy making process to increase the performance of the company, thereby increasing the value of the enterprise to his owners, his shareholders. So we can see these figures. If the firms have the effectiveness of the strategy, firms can increase their profitability and result in the higher profit growth and then increase the shareholder value. And next, okay, we will talk about what the difference between the competitive advantage and the sustained competitive advantage. Competitive advantage occurs when the company's profitability is greater than the average profitability of the firms in its industry. And a sustained competitive advantage, it means when firms' strategy enable them to maintain above average profitability for a number of years. So we can say that sustained competitive advantage, okay, we take a term into consideration. Okay, so here, sustained competitive advantage, we can see when the firm's strategy enable firms to maintain above average probabilities for a number of the years. Okay, so this is the difference between the competitive advantage and the sustained competitive advantage. And here, okay, we will talk about the role of the strategy managers. And here we can say that in most firms, if the firms they are just focus on one business, or they just have the one division, okay, usually, okay, there are two primary type of the managers. One is the general managers. The other one is the functional managers. And for the general managers, okay, they are responsible for the overall firm performance for one of his major sales contained subunit over the division. So the general managers, they are responsible for the profit and firms the profit and the loss. Okay, and for the functional managers, they are responsible for supervising a particular function. For example, like R&D, like marketing, or financial, okay, or the manufacturers. Okay, so they are responsible for supervising a particular functions. Okay, so this is the functional managers. However, in many the firms, okay, many the Taiwanese firms or Japanese over the Korea firms, we can find that some firms they have the multi-divisional. Okay, so for example, like the here, okay, we can see the Far Eastern group, business group. They have the many the division. So we can see here they have the retail business. They have functional service, okay, and transportation. So you can see some firms they have the many the business, and they have several different business, and this business has to create a separate self-contained division to manage each. Okay, so we can see the fingers in this kind of the companies. Usually they have the three level. So we can see the top level is the corporate level. Okay, including CEO, board of director, and the second we can see the business level. Okay, so we can see the division A, division B, and the division C, and each the division they have their own functional level managers. So for example, the division A, it has his own R&D, marketing, manufacturer, finance, human resource management. And for the division B, it also has his own R&D, marketing, manufacturer, and human resources management. Okay, so in this kind of the companies, they have the three label: corporate label, business label, and the functional labels. Okay, so we can see here, a company that competes in several different business and has created a separated self-contained division to manage each. Okay, so we can say this is for the multi-divisional companies. And next, we will talk about the role of the different level managers. So here we will talk about the role of the different level managers. Okay, so first, for the corporate level the managers, these level managers, they oversee the development of the strategy for the whole firms, for the entire organization. So they have to define the goal of the organization. They determine what business it should be in or it should be out. And the third, they have to allocate the resources among the different business. And finally, they have to formulate and implement a strategy that spans individual business. So for the corporate level managers, their concern is with building and managing the corporate portfolio of the business to maximize the firm's profitabilities. So this is for the corporate level managers. And for the business level manager, here a business unit is the self-contained division. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, this division with its own functions. With its own R&D, with its own the marketing, and with its own the manufacturing, human resources. So this business unit is the self-contained division that provides a product or service for a particular market. So the role of the business level manager is to translate the general statement of the direction and the intent that come from the corporate world into the concrete strategy for the individual business. So, for example, if the corporate level, let's say that, I hope we can be a market leader in AV business. So if you are the head of the hotel division, or maybe you can say that also we have to increase the occupation rate. Because we wanted to be a market leaders, right? So here, the head of the hotel divisions, they have to think about how to increase their occupation rates. And for the functional level managers, they are responsible for the specific business functions. So they develop a functional strategy to fulfill the strategic objectives set by the business and the corporate level general managers. So this is the role for the three level managers. And next, we will talk about the formal strategy planning process. So for the formal strategy planning process, you have the 5 steps. First, we have to select the firm's mission and goals. And the second, we have to analyze the firm's, the organization, the external environment. So this means we have to identify the opportunity and the threats. And the third, we have to analyze the internal operation environment. It means identify the strengths and the weakness. So this is the 2 steps. It means the firms, they have to do SWOT analysis, right? And the fourth, when firms understand their opportunities, raise the strengths and the weakness. And then from there have to select layer the organizational strategies. And for the strategies, okay, we have the corporate level strategy, business level strategy, and the functional level strategy. Okay, so select the organizational strategy. Okay, let the firms build on their strengths and correct weakness. And let strategy are consistent with the mission and the major goals. And finally, okay, let the strategy are constitute a viable business model. And then the final step, we have to implement these strategies. If the firms they just have the strategy, however, if the firm do not implement this strategy, we can find that this strategies is useless. So the firms they have to implement the strategies. Okay, so here, component of a mission statement. Here we can see, okay, we will talk about what is the mission, what is the vision, what is the major goals. Okay, mission. Mission means the purpose of the company or the statement of what the company is trying to do. So, for example, like the Toyota, okay, Toyota is the corporate mission is to make ever a better car, to build a future where everyone has the freedom to move. Okay, this is their mission. And the vision. Vision means, okay, it's the firm's desired achievement over the future state. So, like Toyota is the vision is, okay, as a global leader in the future of mobility. And finally, the goal. Goal means, okay, the firm's goal, they have to precise, and the goal have to be measurable. Desired the future state later a company attempt to recognize. So, for example, the goal, okay, like the Toyota, okay, say, okay, maybe, okay, next year, I hope our sales growth rate can increase 5%. So you can see our sales growth rate increased 5%. So 5% is the measurable, right? And also the precisely. Yeah, so the goal, okay, if the firms wanted to set their goals, the goals must be precisely and measurable. Okay, and then next we can see, okay, the very famous company in Taiwan, TSMC. We can see TSMC is the mission. What is the TSMC mission? Its mission is to be the trust the technology and the capacity provider of the global logic IC industry for years to come. And their vision. TSMC vision is to be the most advanced and the largest technology and foundry service provider to fabless company and IDMs, and in partnership with them to fulfill powerful competitive force in the semiconductor industries. So if you wanted to know the firm's mission and the vision, okay, we can go to the company website. You can see that. Okay. And then the last, okay, when we set up the firm's mission, vision, and goals. And the last we have to do is the external and internal analysis. So here, external analysis means identify strategy, opportunity, and threats that will affect how an organization pursued its mission. And for the external analysis, okay, we always do is the industry environment or the micro environment. Okay, so the industry environment in which the company operates. And the micro environment includes the social, legal, international, and technological factors. And for the internal analysis is focused on review the firm's the resources, capability, and competence. Okay, so its goal is to identify the company's the strengths and weakness. So this is the second step and the third step. Okay, we have to do external analysis and internal analysis. Okay, so like I mentioned, okay, last slide, we do the external analysis and internal analysis. Okay, is the like a SWOT analysis, right? So managers compare and control the various alternative positive strategy against each other, and then identify the set of strategy that will create and sustain the competitive advantage. And after doing the external and the internal analysis, then the firms have to develop their strategy. Okay, and for the firm strategy, there are 4 types of the strategy. In terms of the functional level strategy, business level strategy, global strategy, and corporate level strategy. So for the functional level strategy, okay, it is improving the efficiency and the effectiveness of the operation with the companies. And for the business level strategy, it means the way the firm positions itself in the marketplace to gain a competitive advantage. And for the business level strategy, okay, we always talking about the firms that pursue the cost leadership over the differentiation strategy. Okay, so because the different positioning strategy that can be used in different industry settings. So we can see some firms they are pursuing the cost leadership strategy, and some firms that pursue the differentiation strategy. Okay, and for the global strategy, this means the firms this strategy address how to expand operation outside the home countries. So, for example, the firms may use the FDI, or use the joint venture, right? Or just use the exporting. Okay, so this is the global strategy. And finally, the corporate level strategy is about what the business a company should be in or should be out, and then to maximize the firm's profitability. Okay, so there are 4 types of the strategy in terms of the functional level strategy, business level strategy, global strategy, and corporate level strategies. And finally, the step, okay, the firm develop their strategy. And finally, the firms they have to implement this strategy, okay, and the feedback loop. So as I said, okay, strategy implementation. This means the firms take action at the functional, business, and the corporate level to execute a strategy plan. So the firms they have to design the appropriate organization structures, cultures, and the control system to put a change strategy into the action. Okay. And when firms implement their strategy, of course, the firm they have to check if they achieve their goal or not. So this is kind of our feedback loop. Right. So feedback loop provide the information to the corporate level on the first the strategic goals they are being achieved or not. They have to check that. Right. So if the firm they found that they achieve their goals, okay, it's very good. However, sometimes if the firms they found that they do not achieve their goals, under these situations, maybe the firms they have to think about how to change their strategies, okay, or how to implement their strategies, and then okay to fit their goals, okay, and the feedback loop. Okay, what degree of the competitive advantage be accrued and sustained? Okay, so the feedback loop, okay, provide information to the corporate level on the strategic goals that are being achieved. What degree of the competitive advantage being created and sustained? Okay, so this is the 5 step. This is the 5 step, okay, for the strategic planning process. Okay, let's repeat it again. Okay, formal strategy planning process. Okay, have the 5 steps. First, select the corporate mission and goals, and do the external analysis, and then internal analysis. After doing the external and internal analysis, the firms, okay, they develop their strategy. And the final step is to implement these strategies. Okay, so this is the formal strategy planning process. Okay. And finally, we will talk about the Mintzberg's models of the strategy development. Mintzberg, okay, Harry Mintzberg is a famous scholar in business and management field. Okay, and the Mintzberg said that there are 2 types of strategy. One is the planned strategy. The other one is the emergent strategy. Planned strategy means, okay, the firm follow the formal strategy making process. It means the 5 steps. Do you remember? Okay, I mentioned earlier the 5 the stage. Okay, it follows the formal strategy making process. It's the top-down planning mechanisms. However, we can say that because the environment it changes so fast, right? So sometimes the planned strategy are not implemented because of the unpredictable change in the environment. So these strategies are unrecognized. Okay, and then the next is the emergent strategy are the unplanned response to unforeseen circumstance. Okay, so it means the emergent strategy are the unplanned strategy. However, because the environment the change, so the firms they have to respond this change, right? So we have to understand the planned strategy means the firm following the formal strategy making the process, and the emergent strategy means, okay, this strategy are unplanned, okay, because the environment changes, so the firms have to respond to the change. Okay, so here I have the example. For example, like the Honda in the 1959 when they wanted to enter the United States market. Okay, so in the beginning, the Honda, okay, this is planned strategy. They think that they wanted to sell the 250cc and start the 150cc bike, yeah, to the United States market rather than the small 50cc bikes, because they think that, yeah, everything were bigger and more larger than Japan. So in the beginning, Honda, their planned strategy, they wanted to sell the bigger bike to the United States. However, okay, this products do not sell very good. Okay, and the other the emergent strategy. So one day, okay, the Japanese the exclusive. Okay, their employee they rode the 50cc the bike. Yeah, so they attract a lot of attention. That attract a lot of attention. So at the later times, some firms in the United States, they said they contact with the Honda. They said that, okay, I hope I can cooperate with you because I wanted to, because the small cc, the 50cc bike, yeah, attract a lot of attention. So they wanted to cooperate with the Honda, and they wanted to sell this the 50cc bike to the United States in the market. So you can see this is the emergent strategy because the Honda, okay, they do not, okay, plan this the strategy. However, it's happened. Yeah, so the Honda finally entered the previously untouched market. So this is kind of emergent strategy. Yeah, they do not plan to sell the 50cc bike to the United States market, right? However, finally, they sell it to the US market. Okay, so this is some example for the planned strategy and the emergent strategy. Okay, however, like the Honda is the case, we can see their planned strategies, okay, are unrecognized. Okay, and the emergent strategy are recognized. Okay, so this is the case. Okay, for the Honda. And finally here, I would like to introduce the two types of strategy planning in practice. Okay, here, two the planning. One is the scenario planning. The other one is the decentralized planning. Okay, the first, the scenario planning means that it involves formulating the plan. They are based on what if scenario about the future. So in other words, it means that the firms, okay, they might think about, okay, if in the future, okay, have the scenarios A, they have the plan A to respond to this scenario. However, if the scenario B happens, the firms they will use the plan B to respond to the scenario B. If the scenario C happened, the firms they have a plan C to respond to the scenario C. Okay, so this is the scenarios the planning. They have the different plans. Okay, and the next is the decentralized planning. Decentralized planning means that successful strategy planning encompasses the managers at all levels of the corporation. It's not just the top-down. Okay, when the firms they want to develop strategy, it's not just the top-down. Okay, so the strategy encompasses the manager at all levels of the corporation. And we can see that much of the best planning can and should be done by business and functional managers because they are close to the factors and the customers. Okay, so the firms, okay, sometimes the firms, they will have the decentralized plannings, like the business level and the functional level. Okay, managers should develop the strategy together. Yeah, because the business and the functional level managers, they are close to the fact and the customers. Okay, so this is the content of this course. Okay, thank you for your listening. Bye-bye.